All right, we've been waiting for this one for a long time. If you enjoyed Mandy with Nick Cage. If you enjoyed Mandy, Color Out of Space. Color Out of Space. HP Creeper Craft. HP Love Creeper. He based this story on a tale that he came up with, which is about a place out in the woods where there's a mysterious radiological style event that has poisoned everything in the region, way out in the middle of the woods. And anybody who gets near it develops rashes, develops mange, and essentially goes completely batshit crazy. And that's what Nick Cage will do in this movie. It was a lot of fun. We get classic Crage. That's Cage Rage. He does really well in this role. He's back to full form like he was in Mandy. And it's tied with Witch Legends. This is interesting too. So the film will take it in some new directions that I didn't know what we would see. And we start with the daughter who's out there in the woods, pretending that she's a Gardnerian witch, right? So she's in the tradition of Wicca, and Gardner, if you didn't know, was actually a student of Crowley. Now that's going to be relevant because Aleister Crowley, the famous Satanist, his system will be referenced in the movie. Did you notice it? Now, if I'd only watched the movie one time, I would have missed it, but I went back and I watched it because we all saw the Necronomicon. We saw the reference to the Lovecraftian made-up story of the Necronomicon, right? This mad Arab's way to invoke the entities, as it's known as, right? The Necronomicon. Well, she's a Wiccan who likes the darker side of things. And so she does a spell where she attempts to get a blessing from the deities, the old ones, you could say, to cure her mom's cancer, because we later find out that her mom has some form of, I think it was ovarian or something, I can't remember, but she's got a form of cancer, and so they're hoping that she can be cured after her operation that she's undergone. She has the compass, which points in the four cardinal directions, and she calls upon the different angels, which is part of the esoteric tradition, Hermeticism, etc., where you do the cardinal points and call upon the angels of those cardinal directions. Now she meets the black dude who is like, "What are you up to? What is this?" And he trying to spit some game, trying to spit that Wiccan game, and it doesn't work. And so he comes back later, but he's relevant because they're at the edge of that reservoir, and he is the hydrologist. He's there to test the water. This is going to be very relevant for later on in the film. So as we survey the whole family, we notice that they're fairly normal. Nick Cage is kind of a boomer, clueless sort of boomer who they left the city out to the middle of nowhere to this house that he's inherited, and they're seemingly doing well. Well, we hear that there's a large corporation that wants to put into place a giant aquifer. Right? They're going to put this huge hydraulic plant there that's going to give water to the whole state or something like this, right? Because it's this special body of water out in the middle of 12 miles outside of town, out in the middle of nowhere. So then things get a little bit weird because we notice the daughter, not only does she have the Crowley Book of the Law, which is the principles laid down for the religion of Thelema, Crowley's own personal occult favorite religion. The idea of basically worshiping your own will and intention is essentially what it is. Making that manifest, right? Well, we start to wonder, has the daughter's ritual been effective, right? So not only did she, well, let's put it this way. The ritual apparently is effective, but not in the way that she wants it to be effective, as we'll see. But again, it's important to notice that not only does she have that, but they show her with a poster that says Babylon, the Babylon working, obviously being referenced here, which Crowley and Jack Parsons and those clowns thought that they had found a portal to the netherworld. And in this film, we will see the portal to the netherworld is opened in their well, their water well, right? The poisoning of the well. Now, in the middle of the reunion between Nick and his wife, right? They've not been intimate for a long time because of her operation. So at this mystical point where they do unite, for some reason, this seems to trigger the entities. The entity, the color out of space, which we'll see later on is Lucifer. The entity essentially sends its seed to Earth, right? So Nicolas Cage, involved in his ritual action, propagating the seed, leads to the entity propagating its seed. And so you have this meteor that looks like flaming hot McDonald's cherry pie, basically, stinking up the place. And it's interesting too that Nicolas Cage is the only one who can smell it. Right? You smell that? You smell that? Right? He keeps going on about how bad it smells, but everybody else they have different senses affected, which is interesting. So immediately we know that this is something completely otherworldly, right? It's other than what we know. It doesn't have any specific form or shape. It seems to be affecting everything in the environment. So the daughter decides that, well, maybe my ritual was effectual. Like she's like, they see this meteor out there. She thinks my ritual is effectual. Perhaps the child, the younger, they have a little kid. The little boy ends up traumatized, right? So this leads to him being out of it. He finally comes back to his senses, and they think, all right, everything's go back to normal. But we start to realize that there is some strange pinkish, looks like cotton candy floating around in their liquids, in all their drinks, and they're just ingesting this, right? They're just downing it over and over and over. We see them gobbling, taking it down. Very Invasion of the Body Snatchers type stuff here, right? So we got a little bit of John Carpenter that's coming into play here in a moment with the alpaca. The alpacas! We have 5 fucking alpacas, right? If you remember that great scene. And by the way, Tommy Chong plays Boomer Garcia, right? They have the hippie boomer that squats on the property. He functions as the sage character, who is, of course, right all along. He warns everybody, yeah, man, you got like the aliens are here, man. You guys aren't paying attention, but, man, they've been here for a long time, and they're back, man. And nobody listens to the old hippie. It's a common theme, right, in films where the old hippie is right. Remember Cabin in the Woods? He's not an old hippie, but the stoner dude is the guy who's right. He's like, maybe they're listening to our thoughts, and we're puppets, we're puppets, man. There's puppet masters. So, back to the kid. He's traumatized. They all sort of come out of this, and then we see Mama cuts her fingers off. Woo. She goes into a trance, cuts her fingers off. And then we start to realize, oh, it's the water. The water is poisoned. Hello, y'all. I've been called crazy for saying this since 2004 when I started realizing the water was poison. Everybody calls me crazy. I've been called crazy for so long. I'm telling you, the water is. They want our precious bodily fluids, right? Like what is it, Colonel Kurtz or whatever? Not Colonel Kurtz. Mandrake, right? Mandrake. He's talking to Mandrake. Whatever the guy's name is. Dr. Strangelove. You know what I'm talking about. He's always talking about them poisoning the water, and they want our precious bodily fluids. Anyway, now their name also, remember, they're Gardner, so they're a bloodline, apparently, perhaps related to Gerald Gardner. We don't know. We're never told that, but the name, I think, is significant that she identifies with being a Gardnerian Wiccan, which is a made-up thing, by the way. It's not an ancient religion. And Gardner is, it's not an accident that, he's the ritual magician for creating Wicca, basically. Anyway, that's all at play. My thesis is that it's not just the tainted water or the Luciferian thing, but she is the conduit. Her ritual actually was effectual. That's the point, I think, of the film. And what happens is that when this entity arrives, it practices inversion, meaning that it's the negative force, like a kind of like a tapping into a dark energy, dark matter that's almost living, right? Remember in Twin Peaks season 3 when the demon is coming through the portal at the Trinity site from the nuke testing and all this nonsense, right? So here it's the same idea, but it's the entity that's off-world, right? It's a foreign planet that's essentially coming to our planet and affecting the entire biosphere. Everything from human relations to the mind to frequencies to light to vision to sight, all the senses, sound, and it's a spiritual attack as well. And there's a key to all that when the Tommy Chong character has gone on. He's become basically possessed. He's gone, but he's left a tape recording to tell everybody what is going on. And he says, something to the effect of, it's here to turn our world into its world, right? It only knows what it knows, and it knows evil and inversion, darkness, all this stuff. So it is quite literally the anti-force, the satanic force, the demonic force that is inverting everything. And she did, I believe, invoke it. And so it is the harbinger of the new aeon, right? That's why she's got Crowley's Book of the Law, which is about the law of the new coming aeon of Horus. It's the new law that will be instantiated in the new aeon, the new yuga, right? The new period in which we will enter into a new phase out of the Christian phase of Pisces and into the Aquarian phase or whatever, right? It will be the phase of inversion, and the weak will serve, right? The slave shall serve, and part of that slave shall serve involves a culling, right? The big culling, Georgia Guidestones, right? So quite literally, that's what's going on here. Now, the news and everybody thinks it's aliens, right? They're like, oh, it's a UFO. And they come and they interview Nick Cage. And he's like, my hair looks terrible. Freaking aliens. I didn't say aliens. He didn't say aliens. He never did say aliens, right? But the news, everybody interprets it this way. And what do the elite entities that show up, these dark entities? And they're conscious, by the way, remember, because they start possessing people. They poison the water. They poison the air. They splice and mutate things. Remember the alpacas become basically a giant bubblegum blob of alpaca demonic gooiness. Remember that? That's one of the best scenes, by the way, when he goes at the alpacas with the shotgun. That was classic with Nick Cage screaming in Cage Rage. So what we see is that, by the way, could this be hinting at Morgellons type stuff too, right? Because he's got this weird stuff growing on him. Basically, everything just goes bat, shite, effing nuts. Everything is inverting. So her ritual was effectual. The Necronomicon apparently worked. And by the way, did you notice when she actually did the blood ritual is when it went into full-on super phase, right? Before that, it was kind of weird, creepy stuff going on, minor things, like little, praying mantises that are fabulously gay. Remember the gay praying mantis? He pops out and he's sparkling pink with 6 eyes. This fabulous praying mantis. He's a mutation, so it's mutating everything around it, and they even reference things like radiation, right? It has the power to seemingly affect things around it like radiation with mutations. It's basically a purple kind of Morgellons, right? And it affects the air too. We notice a lot of scenes with the air is basically populated with this particulate, this sort of chemical particulate. So there's an apocalyptic aspect to this, I think. There's the influence, obviously, of John Carpenter. And by the way, Richard Stanley, the director, is the guy who wrote Hardware. Now, I need to cover Hardware. I apologize. I haven't done Hardware yet. But Hardware is very esoteric, and explicitly Richard Stanley says the whole point of Hardware is to point out that Hollywood is a giant Gnostic cult, basically. Gnosticism is the ethos of Hollywood. He says something to that effect in a famous interview. So we see elements of sex magic there. That's obviously true because of the Crowleyan element. We see that the water's poison. We see that he's reading a book called The Willows, the black dude, the hydrologist. And that is interesting because it's one of the first novels that dealt with this kind of horror in the woods genre in English literature. And it was a big work that Lovecraft loved. Right, so that was relevant. I know I'm saying this out of order, but my notes are a little bit out of order because I went and watched it twice. But it also distorts time, so it actually, this time-space fabric is even messed up. And it almost is likened, they kind of liken it to a bad trip, right? People are talking about it like they're having bad trips, and I think that the way that it has affected the water is really the key. That's what they never seem to grasp. That's kind of amazing, too, that you have everything going crazy, and at no point does anybody in the film actually grasp that maybe the water is tainted, except for the black dude, right? And he actually says this. He's like, why is everybody drinking the water? Don't you realize this water is not good? But they're all oblivious to it. Like, they're all totally oblivious. Basically, the apocalypse is happening around them, and everybody's totally oblivious. I liken it to reality, the real world. Like, I'm not saying necessarily we're in the apocalypse, but it's almost apocalyptic, the crazy stuff that's going on all around us, and most people are still oblivious. And they're concerned with trivialities, things that don't even matter, right? Like, the mom's worried about the internet connection. Like, the apocalypse is happening, and she's worried about the internet. He's worried about, Nicolas Cage is worrying about his crop of peaches, right? Which is funny because that recalls Wild at Heart, if you remember the peaches line. He's worried about his peaches, and they come 2 months early, the tomatoes and the peaches, and they're like these gigantic GMO mutations, right? And they taste like garbage because he starts eating them and spits them out and goes crazy. He attacks with full rage the peaches and the tomatoes. So what we see is that they're oblivious to the crazy. And the other thing that they're oblivious to is getting away from there. Why the heck did they not leave? Well, there's something about the entity that has the power to kind of keep them there, apparently, right? Now, the reason I liken it to, it's kind of like nuclear energy, right? Like a dark nuclear energy. And she gets the rune, which is a kind of weird, dark Nordic rune. It's the same kind of rune that you actually see pop up in Twin Peaks, right? That's what she gets. She cuts herself when she initiates herself in that cutting branding ritual, which is also kind of a Crowleyan idea. She cuts the rune into her third eye. So she's actually the one that, again, isn't just enlightened and isn't just invoking this with blood rites, but is actually fully the possessed conduit. And so we start to see that the transformation of the world around them, it's altering the very fabric of space to match the frequency of the atmosphere and the dimension, you could say, from the planet of the entity, the color, right? The entity out of space, the color out of space. And so she finally becomes this sort of Babylon woman, right? She becomes fully immersed and possessed by this entity towards the end of the film, when you see, right, the well in the background, and the portal opens up out of the well to the entity's planet, and the entity has the ability to sort of channel his full-on, blast radius, right? And so how does it end? Well, as you know, the blast occurs, and it seems to be like a 3, 4, 5 mile radius, really, just around the household, and everything is just turned to sort of dust, right? And the black dude gets out, and he leaves us with this this sort of recounting of the tale of how he doesn't know what happened. It's something beyond science, beyond explanation, another dimension. We know what happened because we know the esoteric symbolism in the film, and how it was related to sort of Crowleyan rituals. And ultimately, it's an Illuminati Luciferian thing. And the reason I say that, forgot what I wanted to say, is that there's several sequences where you will actually see the full spread of the rainbow, right? The full light spectrum. So that's all of the 7 rays, right, of light, and they call it the light that burns and sucks, right? It's Lucifer, and I mean Lucifer in the sense of like Satan, the fallen angel, right? Lucifer is Satan, and that is biblical, and it's actually true. So there's more to be gained in this movie than you might think. This is actually a pretty wild, dark tale, and I thought it was really good. I highly recommend it. If you liked Mandy, you would definitely love it. It's Nick in full form, so props to Nick Cage for this. And keep in mind that the things that you see in movies like this, in my view, call me crazy, I know everybody thinks I'm crazy anyway, these are kind of warnings, right? I mean, you have essentially the presentation of the elite worldview. And the warning that's in this film is essentially that you should watch out for the water. What does the black dude say at the end? I ain't going to drink that water. It's like, I don't care how pure this is out here, after all this alien nonsense, I'm not drinking that water. So beware of the water. This is Jay Dyer from Jay's Analysis. I hope you like my breakdown. I hope you see that I am correct. If you think I'm wrong, I want you to tell me where I got it wrong, what I'm wrong about. Leave me some comments down below. Tell me what I missed. I'm sure I missed stuff. I know some of you guys are excellent, and you will decode and find stuff that I missed. So tell me what I missed. And then you can also subscribe, click the bell and all that, and follow me here. Subscribe to jaysanalysis.com for more information like this, more movie breakdowns like nobody else, crazy breakdowns. And you can also get my book, signed copies of Esoteric Hollywood 1 and 2 at my website, jaysanalysis.com. Thank you.